It's 10 minutes after 11 o'clock. I don't know if I've ever talked to the son of a president of the United States, but Elliot Roosevelt, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Ken. I'm glad to be with you.
We have a great connection, so I hope this works out very, very fine. You're talking to us from the West Coast.
Yes, it's still morning here.
And rather early, I suppose.
Well, it's 10 o'clock here.
Mm-hmm. You've... No,
wait a minute. It's a little after 9.
Well, that's not so early anyway.
No.
Okay. I don't know if you're an early riser or not, but so it's a pleasure to talk with you about a new book. In fact, your first novel, it says.
Yes,
according
it is.
To all the information I've seen. Murder and the First Lady by Elliot Roosevelt. I guess this has been done before where an author uses real people to tell a story, a fictionalized story.
Herman Wouk did in War and Remembrance.
Uh-huh. It does have a certain amount of charm. I'm wondering, when you sat down to do this, you mentioned names. I know that Kennedy is mentioned, and Johnson, and Lady Bird, and that. Where does the truth actually leave off, and where does the fiction begin?
Well, the introduction of characters such as Lyndon Johnson and Lady Bird Johnson, that's true to life. That is exactly the way it happened, and actually, with regard to most of the characters, my father and mother, they're presented as they acted at the time and in the settings. They're accurate descriptions of the settings at that time. The story itself is fictionalized because, obviously, my mother did not have a secretary who murdered anybody or was accused of murdering anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And but the way in which my mother goes about investigating, that is true to life characterization.
At one point, she's actually almost forced to take a drink.
Right.
I get the feeling that she was a teetotaler, huh?
Oh, yes, she just loathed the sight of liquor. But I think the strongest things that she ever had were maybe a glass of Dubonnet or a glass of sherry once in a while. That was the nearest she ever came to hard liquor.
Whereas your father evidently liked his cocktails.
Well, he was under tremendous pressure all day long, and he liked to be able to relax and have one or two cocktails at night. And I think it was good therapeutic medicine for it.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Help me on my history here, but he served 4 terms in the White House.
Well, he was elected to 4 terms, and his 4th term, he died very early on. He died in April after being inaugurated in January.
Mm-hmm. Had he not died, he may have gone on to serve 5 terms, perhaps.
Oh, no. I think he wanted to stay on really to see victory in World War II, and if he had lived through to see that, he would have realized his greatest hopes for the whole of his life.
Mm-hmm. Well, he definitely turned the country around, of course, with the New Deal. I'm wondering. I'm straying away here from the book just a little bit, but I know comparisons have been made between Ronald Reagan and FDR.
Right.
How do you feel about that?
Well, you realize, of course, that Ronald Reagan, I was present at Father's 100th anniversary of his birth celebration at the White House at luncheon 2 years ago, and at that time, Ronald Reagan made the statement to all and sundry that he voted for Franklin Roosevelt 4 times. He did change his philosophy later on, but I don't think he ever lost his great admiration for my father, because he told me on several occasions that his father had been saved by my father, and that his father died with a great reverence for my father's name.
Okay. It's 15 past 11 o'clock. Elliot Roosevelt is on the line. Let's get back to the story here, Murder in the First Lady. I don't want to give it away, but we do get some insights as to what goes on in the White House through this. Pamela Rush Hodgborn, is accused of murdering her boyfriend. And it really looks bad for her because he dies. And actually, she serves him a drink that had poison in it. And maybe you can even do some more of the setup for me.
Well, you see, the young man who died,
Philip Garber,
was the son of a congressman. And the congressman was rather typical of congressmen who are really not quite as pure and as dedicated as they might be. He was a congressman who was quite greedy. And this young man, early on, had shown in his life that he was a gambler. He was a wastrel. He was in it for the fast buck and so forth. And he happened to have been on the White House staff himself because of his father's influence in Congress. And the net result was that he attached himself to this young lady, British girl, who had come over really as sort of a trainee to work on my mother's staff. And she was had an apartment, and she fell for the blandishments of this young man. And it turned out that they had known each other prior to their White House stints. Mm-hmm. He had met her in England before. So they had a love affair going on over a considerable length of time.
Okay. Anyway, he winds up dead. We find out that he has another gal a little later on in the story. And I really don't want to give too much of it away because you should never really give a mystery away. Could you really see your mom doing that kind of thing? Eleanor Roosevelt, I know...
My mother was famous for fiercely defending anybody who she felt was in any way attacked unfairly. And she believed strongly in the underdog and always came to the defense of anybody who seemed to have absolutely no defense for the onslaughts and accusations that were being made against them.
Mm-hmm. Actually, she had, maybe you can clarify me on this, but I've heard that many people at the time thought that your mother almost had as much impact on how government was run or on how the presidency was run as your father during some of those times. She was...
Well, actually, she became an extremely influential person. She was famous for getting things done. People would call or write her and say that they had a problem and it was an emergency and needed immediate action. And she would go to the department which could deal with it. And absolutely, no matter what the department said about the impossibility of hurrying it, she'd get it done. She'd go to the person at the head.
Mm-hmm. Franklin Eleanor Roosevelt, maybe.
Right.
Could have been a term for who occupied the White House at that time. I'm going to ask you about this. J. Edgar Hoover is not painted in a very shining light in your book. Is there a reason for that?
Yes.
You have one of those phones, don't you, Elliot? I think we do have one of those phones where the calls come in. I'm going to have to try to get back. I think we've definitely lost him. Let me call him back, and we'll talk more about Murder and the First Lady. It's 20 minutes past 11 o'clock. Well, we made connection again, and sorry about that, Elliot. I don't know, somewhere along the line we got disconnected.
Yeah, that was too bad. I
don't
know just exactly what I was saying when we were cut off.
Was it because we mentioned J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI?
I think so. I think they were listening in.
Why is it that Hoover is not painted in the best of light in the story?
Well, my mother felt that J. Edgar Hoover harassed people unnecessarily and invaded their privacy when they had done nothing wrong, and that he sometimes harassed people and put them into such a bad position that he ruined their lives. And she resented J. Edgar Hoover's way of doing things.
Mm-hmm. In fact, Scotland Yard is sort of painted out to be a little bit better than the FBI, I think, as far as their investigation.
Yeah, I think she tries to make out that the Scotland Yard is a little more understanding.
Yeah. I don't want to keep going into the novel any deeper than we have, but it's a good one. It will sort of keep you on the edge of your seat. And
it's summer reading, and when you're traveling or anything like that.
Yeah, Murder and the First Lady is really the first of at least another one. You're working on a sequel right now, aren't you?
Yeah, I've already got it into the publisher.
Yeah. Would you mind if anybody asks you a question or two while we have you on the line?
No, not a bit.
I may put you on the spot here a little bit, but I'd kind of like to know what it was like living in the White House back about 1939. I assume you were around then, weren't you?
Oh, yes. I was around up through until 1940, then not so much.
Mm-hmm.
Then I had to go in the service.
What was it like at that time, growing up?
Well, it was extremely interesting to live in those days and to be a part of that scene. From a personal standpoint, it was a little difficult because most of the people that you came in contact with were looking for favors from either your father or your mother, and that meant that trying to find out who wanted to be nice to me for what reason was a very difficult job for me.
Because of who you were, really?
Correct.
Who your father and mother were.
Well, it was who my father and mother were and how important they were to everybody's lives at that time.
Mm-hmm. 829-2345 is our number, or 1-800-322-9377. I had some ringing lines here, and I started talking. If you'd like to call in and ask Elliot Roosevelt a question, give us a call. It's, Social Security was one of those programs that came along with the New Deal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that now, Elliot?
Yeah, I think what people don't really realize is that Social Security, as it was envisioned by my father, was completely ruined through the ensuing years. He did not regard this as a complete retirement program. This was to help people when they came to retirement, to give them a little added income, and it was never contemplated to burden the Social Security program down with all of the things like putting children and grandchildren through college and putting being able to do all kinds of extra things with it, like health and so forth, Medicare, Medicaid. My father would have had that as a completely separate program standing on its own.
In other words, Social Security became a catch-all for almost everything.
Yeah, not only a catch-all, but then it lost its prime reason for being, which was that it was to be maintained as a separate fund with its own investments, separate from the general funds of the United States. And under the Truman administration, Congress did pass a law putting all the monies received into the general fund, and thereafter it never earned any interest.
Whereas it could have been making interest all that time, I suppose.
It could have been such a big, huge, successful program today that you wouldn't even recognize it.
Mm-hmm. Did your father have a lot of clout on Congress or with Congress at that time?
He had loads of problems. After the second election in 1936, he started having more and more problems. He always had a Democratic Congress that he carried in with him on each election. But I will tell you that the Democrats did not always go along with his thinking.
Not 100% anyway.
No.
I'm trying to remember. There's a story that came out, it's probably been longer than I can remember right now, but probably 4 or 5 years ago, they tried to uncover the fact that your father knew Pearl Harbor was going to occur.
Oh, yes. That's been a story that's been spread all over I did a great deal of research on that myself, and I can tell you that he had not the faintest idea of the attack, but he did keep warning the American people that they could expect an attack at any time, not particularly on Pearl Harbor, but anywhere where America had a possession or even on the West Coast. And he kept warning the people of this country from the 1st of November on that an attack was eminently possible at any minute.
Okay. Good morning. Do you have a question?
Yes. Franklin Roosevelt was always my sort of childhood hero because I was born during that time, and he was just it. And my father always gave me a great respect for Franklin Roosevelt, and he's read a lot about Teddy Roosevelt. But I think it is a compliment to our American political system that my father, who was a strong Republican, not one who would vote a straight ticket, but a strong Republican, could give me such a beautiful respect for a president who was a strong Democrat, that I grew up thinking that this was the only president, and all presidents since then have been measured by him. But I have a great respect for him, and since I had never had a chance to meet him and just felt sort of cheated that I didn't have a chance to meet him because I was little, and of course he passed away, but it would be a pleasure for me to greet the president's son, since I did not have a chance to meet that president who was my president.
I thank you, dear. I'm very happy to have the chance to meet you, even over the airwaves.
Thank you.
Thank you for calling.
Bye.
It's, I just happened to, all of a sudden, it just occurred to me again how the country was painted in that period, and how it got turned around with the New Deal. Annie comes to mind, that show. I take it you saw that musical, didn't you?
Oh yes, I loved it.
Certainly painted your father in a great light.
Yeah.
It's the more I talk to you now, the more I can almost hear a similar quality in your voice. You wouldn't do the only thing we have to fear is fear itself for us, would you?
I don't think that I would do it any real justice. So I think you better skip that one.
You do have a similar quality in your voice, though, to your father, I believe.
Well, I imagine there's some, although I don't have the accent, the New England accent that he has.
Yeah. Can I ask how old you are, Elliot?
I'm 73. I'll be 74 in September.
Well, good.
I'm exactly 10 years older at this writing than my father was when he died.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a question?
Oh, I just want to echo what your last caller said in this regard, and that I have been reading quite a bit recently the books that have come out about your mother, and as someone who's been involved in both the civil rights movement and the women's movement, I find her a great inspiration. What a lady. What a wonderful charger, a header she was in both those causes when they were things that people didn't even want to bother with.
That's right.
So thank you very much.
Definitely in the forefront, long before it became really a national issue. She was one of those who was in the forefront of civil rights and also of women's rights in this country and throughout the world.
Good morning. You're on the air.
I wanted to ask Mr. Roosevelt if he remembers the slogan that his father used on his campaign pictures.
Which one was that?
Well, his campaign posters, his slogan right above it. You remember what it was?
Happy Days?
The voice of the people.
Oh, that's right. You're right.
And it's a pleasure to speak to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm delighted to have you remind me of that slogan.
The voice of the people. We've sort of picked that up around here. We call it this radio station that from time to time. Good slogan.
Yeah.
WJBC, good morning.
Yes, I just wanted to know how Mr. Roosevelt felt about his father at the Yalta Conference.
Well, I have read all of the white papers on the Yalta Conference and have searched for where the agreements were made that gave away all of the control of Eastern Europe, et cetera, to the Soviets. I did not find them in those papers, but I did find them in the Potsdam papers when the big rush was on to get the troops out of Europe and over to the Pacific. And that was a problem that Mr. Truman had. And the only thing that I found at the in the Yalta papers was that FDR agreed to triumvirate occupation, governmental occupation of all of the countries as they were recaptured, but in no instances did he give it to a single country. It was supposed to have been done in just the same fashion that they set up the triumvirate occupational government in Berlin, and every country was supposed to have had the same thing. I do not find that he gave away at the Yalta Conference what has been inferred by historians since then.
Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the call. Elliot, it's a pleasure to visit with you. It's a fine work. Was this your first book? Or I know it's your first novel, but your first book?
No, I've written 8 books.
Oh, okay.
And this is the only fictional book that I have had published. I have another one that is coming up.
Which is more fun to write?
Oh, I think fiction is a lot easier because I can do it from my memories and my own impressions rather than have to go and do a tremendous amount of research.
Mm-hmm. Maybe a little bit more creative on this part then. With your imagination, you can run wild sometimes.
I love to let my imagination run.
Yeah. Elliot, thank you very much for visiting with us. Murder and the First Lady, the name of the book by Elliot Roosevelt. Mrs. Roosevelt Investigates. It's a St. Martin's Press publication, and you'll find it on the bookshelves. Thanks again, Elliot.
Thank you.